Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right. I am very honored to be here to speak to you about AI and social justice. I think this is an incredibly important topic and an area where the church has an opportunity to play a large leadership role in making sure that things happen in a way that protects the most vulnerable among us. So these are I do consult for companies that work in the AI space. None of it is related to any of the things I'm speaking about today. And this is a quote that I live by. It says, "This is worship, to serve mankind and to minister the needs of the people. Service is prayer, a physician administering to the sick gently, tenderly, free from prejudice, and believing in the solidarity of the human race. He is giving praise." And so I think that our work, here in this space, in trying to find ways to use AI to help people and not to cause harm, is an opportunity to give praise, is an opportunity to do service, and an opportunity to be leaders in a space that needs moral leadership desperately. So AI is a tool, and I think Leo likes to say this too all the time, and it is a tool that can cause significant harm, and it is a tool that can lead to significant improvements. And which of these it becomes is up to us. So I'm going to talk a lot about the harms first, and I think the reason for that is because a lot of the leading voices and leadership in this field are from the major technology companies, and they are motivated by making as much money as possible, serving their shareholders, all of that. And so they do not think necessarily about the moral repercussions of what they do. Versus here, we are thinking about human dignity. We are thinking about uplifting others. And so I will talk specifically about 3 harms. They are not, inclusive of every type of harm that exists. I'll talk about the exploitation of labor for model labeling. I'll talk about the environmental impact of large-scale models, and I'll talk about model bias, which is actually a significant amount of work that I've done. Somebody joked to me, they say, "Oh, you're talking about AI and social justice. Are you even allowed to say that in the United States anymore?" And I said, "Well, we're in Rome, so I can say whatever I want." So these large-scale AI models like ChatGPT are very data hungry. They are trained on large amounts of data, textbooks from the internet, but there's still a lot of labeling that needs to happen. And in fact, what happens is that these companies leverage data labelers, often in the global south, and pay them wages that do not give them an adequate living. Something like an average of $1.50 an hour. There is no job security with these positions. They are given short-term positions, and it is incredibly stressful. They are under intense surveillance and performance monitoring, and if they make too many mistakes, the companies can basically just cut them off. And so with that, they will lose even the small amount of income that they're making. And yet these companies are making billions of dollars off of what they've built. Content moderation is also human-led. This is meaning that when these models put out harmful things, and in particular ChatGPT puts out like harmful text, they ask labelers, and in particular there are teens in Kenya, and they were exposed to graphic, disturbing, and violent passages that they had to moderate. I'm actually not going to mention some of the types of things they had to read because I was significantly disturbed even thinking about it. And they are given no psychological support. There was a story in The Guardian, this is a quote, "It's destroyed me completely." One of the moderators tells his story where he became so significantly distressed from the kind of horrible graphic things that he was reading and labeling as a way to make money for his family, that it actually eventually led him to withdraw and end up getting divorced from his wife and just sort of unable to function because there was just no psychological support. These are things that no human should have to read, but yet because these models are trained even on the darkest corners of the internet, they can output some very horrifying things. So the environmental impact of large-scale models. Large AI models require massive amounts of computational power, and it is estimated, this is an estimate, I actually think with these newer models that train on a much larger compute, have even more like this, but they say a single AI model has the same amount of CO2 emissions as the lifetime emissions of 5 cars. And then there's this exploitation of resources through data centers. So the majority of data centers are still in the United States, Europe, but the global south has become a target for tech companies to start building data centers. And the reason for this is because these countries have weak environmental regulations and less government oversight. So they're exploiting this opportunity to build these energy-intensive, water-intensive, resource-intensive data centers in areas where they know there's not regulation and their power will not be checked. And so what this can lead to is local environmental degradation and natural resource depletion in countries that are already vulnerable. And so, for example, Kenya is in one of these countries that has been specifically targeted, and Kenya has, experienced a lot of drought. And not only do these AI models require a lot of electricity, these data centers become very hot and they require cooling systems that use up a lot of water. Now imagine you have an area that is prone to drought, and now you have these data centers that are using up a lot of the local resources. And then this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I am, in addition to being an AI researcher, also a practicing dermatologist. And in dermatology, when we are diagnosing skin cancer and skin disease, it turns out that dermatologists are not trained as well across all skin tones. That is a bias of the textbooks, at least in the United States. But it turns out that a lot of these models have gotten baked in to AI as well. When we did a study in 2022, we found the majority of the AI models that were trained to diagnose skin disease were only trained on skin disease of people who had white skin, and that brown and black skin was significantly excluded. In additional research that we have since done, we actually tested models and showed that the models performed worse on brown and black skin, and that you could fix this problem if you actually just use data from around all the different diverse skin tones. I do want to specifically dial in on large language models and bias there, because this is something that everybody is using now. Everyone, is there anyone in the room who hasn't used ChatGPT? Please raise your hand. I use Claude. Okay, but you've used ChatGPT before. Right. And so this was touched on a bit, and I apologize if this is repetition from earlier today, but these models are sort of built, first of all, most of the companies don't talk about how they've built their models specifically, so it's like a sausage. You don't really know what's in the sausage, but you're still we're all still eating the sausage, I guess. But the first part is the model is training by playing a game with itself. Essentially, it is taking all these textbooks, internet text, and it's covering up words and trying to guess what the next word is. So if I said, the dog became excited and ran across the grass to chase what would you say? Yes, people say cat, people say ball. And so the thing is, even in your mind, you have an idea of how language is supposed to work and what words go together. And that's what the model is learning. It's like fancy autocomplete. It's learning what are the probabilities of the next word if I'm given all these words before it. And it doesn't always give the next most probable word. It actually plays around a little bit, and sometimes we'll give and that's why it actually sounds more human-like, because if you put it on a setting where it only gives the next most probable word, it sounds very robotic. From there, and we talked about this, it takes feedback from humans. And so you might have seen this where it gives you more than one answer and asks you to pick one. Or, for example, you can give the thumbs up or thumbs down. And so that is where it is training off of humans and human feedback. And that's where they use a lot of the labelers and the content moderation and all of you, the users, to try to change things. And then there's the way that you actually prompt it. If you ask it a question and give it an answer and ask it a question, it'll get it wrong. But if you ask it a question and explain how to answer it, and then ask it a question, it can get it right. So even the way that you ask a model something can impact how the model responds. And I think we talked also about sycophancy earlier. We recently did publish some work on sycophancy in medicine and mathematics, and found that if you told the model that it was wrong, even when it gave a right answer, it would actually apologize and would change the answer now to agreeing with your view of the world, even if it was incorrect. So I think this is important for understanding bias. There was a study done unrelated to AI at all in 2011, looking how words are associated in books, newspapers, in human text, and found the reverberations of structural racism in our texts. So for example, they found that when they saw things describing black people, often associated words were poor, violent, religious, lazy, versus white people were wealthy, progressive, conventional, stubborn, educated, successful. And so what this means is that our human text contains the traces of these deeply harmful biases, and now you're training this model on these human texts, and you expect it not to learn those same very harmful associations? No, that's not true. It actually does learn the harmful associations. And so we did a study by one of my very talented postdocs, Dr. Omoye, who looked at how these models give false answers to questions in medicine that are impacted by race. Things around calculating EGFR, which is kidney function. So red is bad. We asked each model 5 times, and the more red, the more times it gave answers that were just harmful. And so it would give different, it would tell you that you should use race in calculating kidney function, which has since been debunked, and even the society, the nephrology societies in the US have asked that we no longer do that. It gave different equations for calculating lung function, which is also another debunked thing around how race impacts lung function, because race is a social construct. It is not rooted in any true biological differences between us. And so what we found is that models could give very harmful answers to physicians potentially asking questions that could impact people based on their race. So I have told you about a lot of bad things that AI can do, but I do want to leave you with some good, and I mostly tell you about the bad things because, again, we need moral leadership, and we need a voice in this space of people who actually have power to speak up, because the people who run, you know, in Silicon Valley, there are plenty of people who are talking about these harms, but they are not generally in positions of power. They don't have the ability to steer things towards, you know, the sort of moral direction that we would like things to be steered towards. But I believe that, you know, the church does have both the moral authority and the ability and the power to help steer things towards the way that we would like to see AI used, which is models improving access to knowledge, models allowing access to care and resources. So there was a recent study done. It did involve a company called OpenAI, which has done has made ChatGPT and has done a lot of these very harmful practices that I mentioned. So barring the harmful practices, they did a study where they worked with Penda Health, which works in Africa, and looking at using AI to help their doctors do better. And so they looked across tens of thousands of visits. Now, this is not peer-reviewed literature, and there is a lot of drop-off in the study from, you know, the visits in the study period to the ones that they actually analyzed at the end. So I do always take results with a grain of salt when they haven't been peer-reviewed. But at least based on their reported results, the clinical error rates in this trial were improved with the healthcare teams that used AI versus the healthcare teams that did not use AI in these sort of lower resource settings. So you could see that there could be a hope that, you know, in areas where maybe there are not specialists readily available, AI could be used to boost the knowledge of the healthcare teams providing care. And I think we need to do a lot more studies like this where we actually see what the impact is before we can truly conclude that something is actually helpful and leading to improvements in care rather than harm. So this is a diagnostic software that was reported to improve the rate of full recovery in stroke patients. This was done in the UK, where basically if you come in with a stroke, time is brain, but the health system is a bit overwhelmed there. And so they use this AI to help faster identify brain imaging that had stroke in order to give them the appropriate medicine within a shorter time frame, leading to better outcomes. Of course, one thing I will point out about this is that, you know, we're talking about benefits here to countries that already have very nice health systems. And so what I don't want to see is that these benefits of AI only benefit these countries that are already wealthy and already have resources. Meanwhile, the building of AI is exploiting and destroying countries that are already vulnerable. So I leave you with this question, and I use a term that was coined by one of my late mentors who recently passed away, scalable privilege. So can we create a world, his name was Atul Butte, can we create a world where AI leads to scalable privilege rather than harm to those who are most vulnerable? And I leave you with that question, which I think is unanswered for now, but my hope is that you will work towards building such a future where we lead to scalable privilege and not harm. Thank you very much.
period after we had lunch, about critical thinking. The point is, yes, for example, having worked with young people in the Philippines way back in 2021 during the pandemic, or the period where everything seemed to stop, a number of parents encouraged their children not to continue their studies because of the platform that was offered during that time. It was through online. A lot of stress taking place or has happened during the pandemic period. Very concrete example was that of my niece, who pleaded to her mom for her to be allowed to enroll during that period. But my sister was vehement and said a number of times, it will be a waste of time, it will be a waste of money, it will only create a lot of stress. But my niece insisted and asked, or even told my sister, you only have to trust and believe me. And this is a word from a young person. Sir Leosil early this morning already put forward the need for young people to be in the forefront on this issue about AI. The thing is, how do we create a puncture, or are there elements that we need to put forward so that we can really make a space for critical thinking? Are there elements that we can put forward? As earlier we said, we are the problem, we are part of the problem, and the solutions, we need them to encourage, we need to encourage them for them to come forward. How do we create a puncture for that to happen? For young people to be able to experience, for example, on church activities or spiritual events or gathering, for them to be able to have an encounter with Jesus, the organizers has to make sure that they are able to lay down the means for that encounter to happen, given the resources of gadgets, of technology, and everything that in terms of material resources are needed. But how do we really create a puncture that will lead to an opportunity for honest coming out of more opportunities for critical thinking?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I think that, I mean, I don't think I get to be counted as a young person anymore, unfortunately. With the number of gray hairs that have been coming up. But I think that, one thing that's really impacting, having talked to young people, because I have a research lab that is full of people much younger than me, from high school, college, PhD, postdoctoral studies. And there's a lot of uncertainty and fear around how disruptive these technologies are going to be in their lives, and in a way that is almost negative, replacing jobs, causing some of the harms and I think one thing that you could consider doing is doing programs that teach young people how to have moral leadership in their communities and how to sort of pursue social justice and, empower them to feel like they can be a leader in the community. There are a lot of young people who also speak about the harms of AI. The problem, I think, really is, again, we are talking about tech companies that have powerful platforms, billions of dollars that they use to, pay off governments, or, they have a lot of power. You have a lot of power too, and so you could use that power to empower the young people and help them lead the forefront for using these technologies, building these tools in ways that are more aligned with sort of the morals that we would like to see in this world.
Any questions? If none, I will give you Father Greg. Do you want to do a wrap up? Thank you. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if this one will, oh yeah, it will, Rachel.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I like the part especially about the environmental risks as a consequence of creating LLMs. So first, before my question, I'd like to tell you my background in cybersecurity. So specifically on compliance. So actually, one of the reasons it's difficult to embed, should we say, ethical controls for a layman's term, is because we are bombarded with several regulations in order to comply. So let's say startups, they need to comply with SOC 2. If you're a financial PCI DSS, if you're a HIPAA, your health, you have to comply with HIPAA. So there's so many regulations. And on top of that, you need to implement also the AI ethics controls. So my question is there like a streamline right now, a streamlined regulation? Because right now what we have is EU, we have to comply with EU Regulation Act, AI, RMF, ISO, EI, but most of these controls are overlapping with each other. So how do you comply with that? What are your thoughts? That's it.
I think the problem is that the world of AI has moved so fast that regulation hasn't had time to figure out what it wants to do. And so, the US obviously has less regulations than the EU. And so everyone's just kind of trying to put patches on, having learned from social media, which didn't really have regulation and also led to a lot of bad things happening. I do think we need to have a discussion sort of at a global level about what regulation looks like, and countries will still, come up with their own plans. I can't expect companies are going to do anything other than what's in their own personal best interest, to be honest. Because you could think if you build a data center somewhere, you could use that opportunity to put investment into that country and make sure that you're a responsible steward of whatever resources that you're using. But unfortunately, that's not how the world works right now. So I have to say I'm not a regulatory expert, but I do feel like a lot of what has happened with regulation has been sort of reactive. And even so, things are still moving so fast that regulation can't keep up. And so sometimes it becomes too strict, right? Because they're scared and they want to just shut everything down. And sometimes it's a little too loose, and it's not clear where we haven't had enough time to think it through because the technology is just moving too fast. There's another question in there.
As I've heard, you are talking about social justice. I just wanted to ask how the social justice can be served to those poor communities wherein there are lots of communities who are very poor.
Yeah.
How it can be of help also with them using the AI.
Well, I think first of all, I think it needs to not be external necessarily coming in, but built out from the community within and of itself. And, you know, given that the church is present in many of these communities, empowering these communities to think about how these models and how this technology could improve their lives. What I don't want to see is like me coming in and telling these communities how they should be using AI to help themselves, because I don't understand what their needs are, but just, you know, building empowerment, particularly among the young people in those communities, to learn how to use technology, to think about how technology could best benefit whatever their needs are, whether that's educational, whether that's like having more literacy in that community. And so that's how I would approach it and think about it. And obviously, you know, having that presence in that community and being ingrained in it is important, and not coming out from like externally and sort of telling people like what they should be doing.